The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Kensington Palace as Princess Charlotte walked through the grand corridors with purpose. At 15, she had grown into a young woman who carried herself with the grace expected of royalty, yet retained the sharp intelligence that made her stand out among her peers. Her footsteps echoed softly as she made her way to the private wing where she knew she would find Captain James Morrison, one of the most trusted guards in the Royal Protection Detail. Captain Morrison had served the royal family for over 20 years. His dedication was legendary among the staff, and his loyalty to the crown was unquestionable. He stood at attention near the entrance to the private dining room, his uniform pristine as always, his expression professional yet warm when he saw the young princess approaching. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," he said with a respectful bow of his head. "Captain Morrison," Charlotte replied, her voice carrying an unusual weight that immediately caught his attention. "I need to speak with you privately. It's very important." The seasoned guard noticed the tension in her voice immediately. In all his years of service, he had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when something was seriously wrong. Princess Charlotte was known for her composed demeanor, but today something was different. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and there was a look in her eyes that spoke of deep concern. "Of course, Your Highness. Shall we step into the blue sitting room?" he suggested, gesturing toward a nearby private chamber where they could speak without interruption. As they entered the elegantly appointed room, Charlotte closed the door behind them. The captain remained standing at attention, but his expression had shifted to one of genuine concern. He had watched this young princess grow up, had been present for many of the important moments in her life, and he could tell that whatever she needed to discuss was weighing heavily on her mind. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you must remain between us for now," Charlotte began, her voice steady but quiet. "I need your advice, and I need someone I can trust completely. You have my word, Your Highness. Whatever you need to discuss will remain confidential." Charlotte took a deep breath before continuing. "It's about Tom Parker Bowles. Something happened yesterday that I can't stop thinking about, and I'm not sure how to handle it." At the mention of Camilla's son, Captain Morrison's expression became even more attentive. Tom Parker Bowles, while not technically part of the immediate royal family, moved in their circles frequently due to his mother's position as queen consort. Any situation involving him could potentially have serious implications for the family. "What exactly happened, Your Highness?" the captain asked gently, his years of experience telling him to let her speak at her own pace. Charlotte walked to the window, looking out at the carefully manicured gardens before turning back to face him. "Yesterday afternoon, I was in the library doing some research for my history project." "You know the small library on the second floor that most people forget about?" Captain Morrison nodded. He knew exactly which room she meant. It was a quiet space that the younger royals often used for studying, tucked away from the main areas of the palace where staff and visitors typically moved about. "I was there for about an hour when Tom arrived. At first, I thought he was just looking for a book or perhaps wanting to use the computer there. We exchanged pleasantries, and I went back to my work." Charlotte paused, her expression growing more serious. "But then, he started asking me strange questions." "What kind of questions?" the captain prompted, his protective instincts beginning to heighten. "At first, they seemed innocent enough. He asked about school, about my friends, normal things that adults ask teenagers. But then, he started asking more personal questions. He wanted to know about my social media accounts, whether I had any private accounts that my parents didn't know about." Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine, but he maintained his professional composure. "Did you answer these questions?" "I told him that I didn't really use social media much, which is true. But he kept pressing. He said that someone my age must have secret accounts, that all teenagers do. He seemed very interested in whether I had ways to communicate privately with people outside the palace." The implications of such questions were immediately clear to the experienced guard. Anyone with training in security and protection would recognize these as potential grooming behaviors, attempts to establish private communication channels away from parental or guardian oversight. "What happened next?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "That's when things became really uncomfortable," Charlotte continued, her voice becoming even quieter. He moved closer to where I was sitting and said that he could help me set up private accounts that no one would ever find. He said that having privacy was important for someone in my position, that I should be able to talk to people without everyone watching. Captain Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The pattern being described was textbook predatory behavior, and the fact that it was coming from someone in Tom Parker Bowles' position made it even more concerning. He told me that we could be special friends, that he understood what it was like to grow up around the royal family and all the pressures that come with it. He said that his mother had taught him a lot about navigating royal life, and that he could teach me things that would help me too. The princess paused again, clearly struggling with the memory. Captain Morrison, the way he was looking at me, the way he was standing so close, it made me very uncomfortable. I've never felt that way around any adult before, and I couldn't understand why I felt so uneasy. Your instincts were absolutely correct, Your Highness, the captain said firmly. What you're describing raises serious concerns. Did anything else happen? When I told him I needed to get back to my studies, he seemed disappointed. But, then, he said something that really bothered me. He said that this conversation should stay between us, that other people might not understand our friendship. He said that adults sometimes misinterpret innocent conversations between older and younger people, and that it would be better if I didn't mention our talk to anyone. Captain Morrison's blood ran cold. The instruction to keep the interaction secret was perhaps the most alarming aspect of the entire encounter. In his extensive training and experience, he knew that legitimate, appropriate interactions between adults and children never required secrecy. He also said, Charlotte continued, that he would like to talk with me again soon, somewhere more private where we wouldn't be interrupted. He suggested that we could meet in the gardens early in the morning when fewer people are around, or perhaps in one of the unused rooms in the East Wing. The suggestion of secret meetings in isolated locations was the final confirmation the captain needed. This was clearly inappropriate behavior that needed to be addressed immediately and decisively. Your Highness, you did absolutely the right thing by coming to me, he said, his voice filled with both reassurance and determination. What you've described is completely unacceptable behavior, and you should never have been put in that position. Charlotte looked relieved but also worried. I keep thinking that maybe I misunderstood something, that maybe I'm making it sound worse than it was. Tom is family, in a way. His mother is married to my grandfather. I don't want to cause problems for the family. Princess Charlotte, Captain Morrison said, his voice gentle but firm, your comfort and safety are more important than any family relationships or political considerations. What you've described shows concerning behavior that needs to be addressed, regardless of who is involved. The captain's mind was already racing through the proper protocols for such a situation. His first priority was ensuring Charlotte's safety and well-being. His second was making sure that appropriate authorities were notified and that a proper investigation could be conducted. I need you to know that you are not responsible for any problems this might cause, he continued. Adults are responsible for behaving appropriately around young people, and, when they don't, the consequences are entirely their own responsibility. Charlotte nodded, looking somewhat relieved to hear this confirmation. I was so confused because he seemed so normal at first. He was talking about his food writing, his career, things that seemed completely ordinary. But, then, the conversation shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Your intuition served you well, the captain assured her. The fact that you recognized something was wrong and trusted your instincts enough to seek help shows remarkable maturity and wisdom. They spent several more minutes discussing the details of the encounter, with Captain Morrison carefully asking follow-up questions to ensure he had a complete picture of what had occurred. Throughout the conversation, he made sure to validate Charlotte's feelings and reassure her that her decision to report the incident was correct. What happens now? Charlotte asked as their conversation began to wind down. Now, we make sure you're protected and that this situation is handled properly, the captain replied. I'll need to report this through the appropriate channels, which means your parents will be informed, as well as the relevant security officials. Charlotte nodded, understanding that this was necessary even though she felt nervous about the potential consequences. Will Tom know that I reported what happened? The investigation will be handled professionally and discreetly, Captain Morrison assured her. Your safety and well-being will remain the top priority throughout the process. As they prepared to leave the sitting room, the captain made sure Charlotte understood that she could come to him or any other trusted adult if she had any further concerns or if Tom Parker Bowles attempted to contact her again in any way. The weight of what had been revealed hung heavily in the air as they parted ways, each knowing that the events set in motion by this conversation would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Captain Morrison watched as Princess Charlotte walked away, her composure intact despite the difficult conversation they had just concluded, and felt a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that she would never have to face such an uncomfortable situation again. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, suddenly felt less secure than it had that morning, and Captain Morrison knew that his day was far from over. Captain Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the secure phone in his private office. The weight of Princess Charlotte's revelation pressed heavily on his shoulders as he dialed the number for Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams, the head of the specialized unit responsible for investigating crimes involving the royal family. The call he was about to make would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. DCI Williams speaking, came the crisp, professional voice on the other end of the line. Inspector, this is Captain Morrison at Kensington Palace. I need to report a serious incident involving a member of the royal family. This requires immediate attention and complete discretion. There was a brief pause before the inspector responded, her tone immediately shifting to one of heightened alertness. I understand, Captain. Can you give me the basic details? Princess Charlotte has reported inappropriate behavior from Tom Parker Bowles. The incident occurred yesterday in the palace library. I have a detailed account that needs to be properly documented and investigated. Detective Chief Inspector Williams had been expecting a call like this for years. In her 15 years of handling cases involving high-profile individuals, she had learned that power and privilege often created environments where inappropriate behavior could flourish unchecked. The fact that this involved Camilla's son made the situation particularly delicate, but no less serious. I'll be there within the hour, she said immediately. In the meantime, I need you to ensure that Princess Charlotte is safe and that Tom Parker Bowles has no further contact with her. Also, please begin documenting everything you can remember about your conversation with the princess. After ending the call, Captain Morrison sat back in his chair, running his hands through his graying hair. In all his years of service, he had never faced a situation quite like this one. The protocols for handling security threats were clear and well established, but this was different. This was about protecting a young member of the royal family from someone who was, technically, also family. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on his office door. Come in, he called, and was surprised to see Prince William himself standing in the doorway. Captain Morrison, I was hoping to speak with you about Charlotte's security detail for her upcoming engagements, Prince William began, but stopped when he saw the expression on the captain's face. Is everything all right? Captain Morrison felt his stomach drop. He had been hoping to have more time to prepare for this conversation, to have the proper authorities involved before having to inform Charlotte's parents. But there was no avoiding it now. Your Royal Highness, please come in and close the door. There's something very serious we need to discuss. Prince William's expression immediately became grave as he took a seat across from the captain's desk. What's happened? This morning, Princess Charlotte came to me with a very concerning report about an interaction she had yesterday with Tom Parker Bowles. The nature of the interaction suggests inappropriate behavior that requires immediate investigation. The color drained from Prince William's face as he listened to Captain Morrison recount the details of Charlotte's story. With each detail, the prince's expression grew darker, his hands clenching into fists as the full implications of what his daughter had experienced became clear. Are you telling me, Prince William said, his voice dangerously quiet, that Camilla's son attempted to groom my daughter? Based on Princess Charlotte's account, the behavior pattern she described is consistent with grooming tactics, yes. I've already contacted DCI Williams, and she'll be here within the hour to begin a formal investigation. Prince William stood abruptly, pacing to the window as he struggled to control his emotions. The thought of anyone targeting his daughter in such a way filled him with a rage he had rarely experienced. The fact that it was Tom Parker Bowles, someone who had access to his family through Camilla's position, made it even more infuriating. "Where is Charlotte now?" he asked, his voice still tightly controlled. "She's in her private study, working on schoolwork. I've made sure that security is aware she should not be left alone with any non-essential personnel, and, specifically, that Tom Parker Bowles should not be granted access to her." "And, Catherine? Does she know yet?" "Not yet, Your Highness. I felt it was important to inform you first and get the investigation underway before involving more people." Prince William nodded, appreciating the captain's discretion even as his mind raced through the implications of the situation. "We need to tell Catherine immediately. And, then, we need to decide how to handle this without it becoming a public scandal that could damage Charlotte." Captain Morrison understood the delicate balance that needed to be maintained. While the investigation needed to proceed properly, the royal family also needed to protect Charlotte from the media attention that would inevitably follow if the story became public. "DCI Williams is extremely experienced with these types of sensitive cases," he assured the prince. "She'll know how to conduct the investigation thoroughly while maintaining the necessary discretion." Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Tom Parker Bowles was having lunch with his mother, Queen Consort Camilla, completely unaware of the storm that was beginning to gather around him. They sat in Camilla's private dining room, discussing his latest food writing projects and upcoming cookbook release. "You seem distracted today," Camilla observed, noticing that her son seemed less engaged in the conversation than usual. Tom looked up from his meal, offering what he hoped was a convincing smile. "Just thinking about deadlines and upcoming projects. You know how it is." In reality, Tom had been thinking about his conversation with Princess Charlotte the previous day. He had found himself drawn to the young princess in a way that he knew was inappropriate, but he had convinced himself that his intentions were harmless. He told himself that he was simply being friendly, that he was offering guidance to a young person who might benefit from his experience. But, deep down, Tom knew that his motivations were not as pure as he wanted to believe. The way he had maneuvered the conversation, the way he had suggested secret meetings and private communications, the way he had instructed Charlotte to keep their conversation confidential, all of these behaviors indicated that he understood on some level that his intentions were inappropriate. "I ran into Princess Charlotte yesterday," he mentioned casually to his mother. "Bright young woman. Very mature for her age." Camilla smiled warmly. "She is indeed. William and Catherine have done an excellent job raising her. She's going to be a tremendous asset to the monarchy when she's older." Tom nodded, but something in his expression caught his mother's attention. There was something in the way he spoke about Charlotte that seemed slightly off, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Back in Captain Morrison's office, Prince William was on the phone with his wife, Catherine, explaining the situation in careful, measured tones. Even over the phone, the captain could hear the sharp intake of breath from the Princess of Wales as she absorbed the shocking news about what her daughter had experienced. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Catherine said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Don't let Charlotte out of your sight until I arrive." When DCI Williams arrived at the palace, she was immediately escorted to a private conference room where Prince William, Captain Morrison, and, now Catherine, Princess of Wales, were waiting. The inspector was a woman in her mid-40s with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation for handling delicate investigations with both thoroughness and discretion was legendary within law enforcement circles. "Your Royal Highnesses, Captain Morrison," she said with a respectful nod. "I understand we have a very serious situation that needs immediate attention." Catherine spoke first, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. "Inspector Williams, our daughter came forward with allegations of inappropriate behavior from Tom Parker Bowles. We need to know that this will be investigated properly and that Charlotte will be protected throughout the process. I can assure you that this investigation will be conducted with the utmost professionalism and sensitivity," DCI Williams replied. "The safety and well-being of Princess Charlotte will be our primary concern throughout the entire process." The inspector explained the procedures that would need to be followed, including a formal interview with Charlotte conducted by specially trained officers who had experience working with young victims. She also outlined the steps that would be taken to ensure that Tom Parker Bowles had no further contact with Charlotte while the investigation was ongoing. "We'll need to inform His Majesty the King and Queen Consort Camilla," Prince William said, the weight of this necessity heavy in his voice. "This involves Camilla's son, and they have a right to know what's happening." DCI Williams nodded. "That's absolutely appropriate, but I'd recommend waiting until we've had a chance to conduct the initial interview with Princess Charlotte. We want to make sure we have all the facts before involving more people in the situation." As the meeting continued, plans were made for Charlotte's interview, security protocols were reviewed and strengthened, and the delicate matter of how to inform the king and queen consort was discussed at length. Everyone in the room understood that they were dealing with a situation that could have profound implications not just for the individuals involved, but for the monarchy itself. The afternoon sun was beginning to fade as the meeting concluded, and Captain Morrison found himself once again marveling at the courage that Princess Charlotte had shown in coming forward with her concerns. Without her bravery in speaking up, Tom Parker Bowles might have continued his inappropriate behavior, potentially escalating to even more serious offenses. As the various participants in the meeting went their separate ways to begin implementing the investigation plan, the palace seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls understood that a crisis was unfolding that would test the strength and integrity of the royal family in ways they had never been tested before. The specially trained interview room at Kensington Palace had been carefully prepared to make Princess Charlotte feel as comfortable as possible while still maintaining the official nature of the investigation. Soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence typically used in formal interview settings, and comfortable chairs were arranged around a small table rather than the intimidating setup usually associated with police questioning. Detective Sergeant Emma Thompson, a specialist in interviewing young victims of inappropriate behavior, arrived early that morning to ensure everything was perfect for Charlotte's interview. She had extensive experience working with children and teenagers in traumatic situations, and her gentle but thorough approach had helped solve numerous cases involving predatory behavior. Princess Charlotte entered the room accompanied by her mother, Catherine, and the family's legal representative. Despite her royal training and composure, it was clear that the 15-year-old was nervous about the formal nature of what was about to take place. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and she glanced frequently at her mother for reassurance. "Princess Charlotte," Detective Sergeant Thompson said warmly, "thank you for being brave enough to come forward with your concerns. What we're going to do today is simply have a conversation about what happened, so that we can make sure you're safe and that appropriate action is taken." The interview proceeded slowly and carefully, with Detective Sergeant Thompson using techniques specifically designed to help young people feel comfortable sharing difficult experiences. She started with general questions about Charlotte's daily routine and her familiarity with various people who had access to the palace, gradually working toward the specific incident with Tom Parker Bowles. As Charlotte recounted the details of her encounter in the library, Detective Sergeant Thompson took careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. The picture that emerged from Charlotte's testimony was even more concerning than Captain Morrison's initial report had suggested. "He kept emphasizing how mature I was for my age," Charlotte explained, her voice growing quieter as she recalled the uncomfortable conversation. "He said that most adults didn't understand teenagers the way he did, and that he could teach me things about navigating royal life that my parents might not think to share with me." Detective Sergeant Thompson nodded encouragingly. "Can you tell me more about what kinds of things he said he could teach you?" "He talked about how to handle media attention in ways that wouldn't get back to my parents. He said there were tricks to managing social media and public appearances that would give me more freedom. But the way he talked about it made it seem like he was suggesting I should hide things from my parents." Catherine felt her jaw clench as she listened to her daughter describe what was clearly an attempt to create distance between Charlotte and her parents, a classic grooming tactic designed to isolate a young person from their support system. "Did Mr. Parker Bowles make any physical contact with you during this conversation?" the detective asked gently. Charlotte shook her head. "No, he didn't touch me. But he stood very close to me, closer than felt normal. And he kept leaning in when he talked, like he was trying to make the conversation feel more intimate or secret." The detective made careful notes about the spatial dynamics Charlotte described. Non-contact grooming behaviors were often overlooked by untrained observers, but they were significant indicators of inappropriate intent. "You mentioned yesterday that Mr. Parker Bowles suggested meeting again in private. Can you tell me exactly what he said about that?" He said that the library wasn't really private enough for the kinds of conversations we should be having. He suggested meeting in the gardens early in the morning before the groundskeepers arrived, or in some of the rooms in the East Wing that aren't used very often. He said that way we could really talk without interruptions. Detective Sergeant Thompson's expression remained professionally neutral, but internally she was noting the classic escalation pattern that Tom Parker Bowles appeared to be following. The suggestion of increasingly isolated meeting locations was a textbook example of predatory behavior. Did he give you any way to contact him privately? Did he ask for your phone number or suggest any social media platforms where you could communicate? He asked if I had Snapchat or Instagram accounts that my parents didn't monitor. When I told him I didn't really use social media much, he seemed disappointed. He said that someone my age should have more independence and privacy, and that he could help me set up accounts that would be just between us. Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with the legal representative. The attempt to establish private communication channels was perhaps the most damning aspect of the entire encounter. The interview continued for another hour, with Detective Sergeant Thompson carefully documenting every aspect of Charlotte's experience. By the time they were finished, a clear picture had emerged of someone who was following established patterns of grooming behavior with methodical precision. Meanwhile, in a different part of the palace, a much more difficult conversation was taking place. King Charles III sat in his private study, his face grave as he listened to Prince William recount the allegations against Tom Parker Bowles. The king's relationship with his son had improved significantly over the years, and the thought of having to confront his wife about her son's behavior was deeply troubling. "Are we certain about these allegations?" the king asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The investigation is just beginning, but Charlotte's account is detailed and consistent with known patterns of predatory behavior," William replied. "More importantly, Charlotte has never shown any tendency toward making up stories or seeking attention. Her decision to come forward was clearly difficult for her." King Charles nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Camilla will need to be informed immediately. This will be devastating for her." "I know, Father. But Charlotte's safety has to be our primary concern. If Tom has behaved this way with her, there's a possibility he may have targeted other young people as well." The king's expression darkened at this thought. The idea that his stepson might have been engaging in predatory behavior while using his connection to the royal family as cover was deeply disturbing. "How do you think we should handle informing Camilla?" Charles asked. "I think it should come from you," William said carefully. "She needs to hear this from someone she trusts completely, and she needs to understand that while we all hope the allegations prove to be unfounded, the investigation must proceed regardless of the family connections involved." King Charles stood and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where he had spent so many peaceful moments over the years. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier than it did at this moment, when protecting his granddaughter meant potentially destroying his wife's relationship with her son. "I'll speak with her this afternoon," he said finally. "Will you be available to answer any questions she might have about the specifics of the allegations?" "Of course. Catherine and I both will be available whenever needed." As Prince William left his father's study, he passed Tom Parker Bowles in the corridor. Tom offered a friendly greeting, completely unaware that his world was about to come crashing down around him. William struggled to maintain his composure as he exchanged pleasantries with the man who had allegedly targeted his daughter. "I hope to see more of Charlotte around the palace," Tom said casually. "She's growing into such a remarkable young woman." The comment, which might have seemed innocent under different circumstances, now carried sinister undertones that made William's blood run cold. He managed to respond politely before continuing on his way, but the encounter reinforced his conviction that the investigation needed to proceed quickly and thoroughly. Later that afternoon, Queen Consort Camilla sat in stunned silence as King Charles carefully explained the situation to her. Her initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a fierce defensive instinct to protect her son. But, as Charles provided more details about Charlotte's account, Camilla's expression gradually shifted from disbelief to horror. "This can't be true," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tom would never, he's always been good with children. He has children of his own." I understand how difficult this is to hear, Charles said gently, taking his wife's hand. But, we have to take these allegations seriously. Charlotte is a mature, intelligent young woman who has no reason to make up such a story. Camilla pulled her hand away, standing abruptly and pacing to the window. What does this mean for Tom? What happens now? There will be a thorough investigation. If the allegations prove to be unfounded, then no permanent damage will be done. But, if they're substantiated. Charles let the sentence hang in the air, knowing that Camilla understood the implications. I need to talk to him, Camilla said. I need to hear his side of this. I don't think that's advisable right now, Charles replied carefully. The investigators have specifically requested that family members not discuss the case with him until the initial investigation is complete. We don't want to do anything that might compromise the process. Camilla turned to face her husband, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Charles, if this is true, if Tom really did what Charlotte is saying, I don't know how I'll ever forgive myself for bringing him into this family. This isn't your fault, Charles said firmly. You couldn't have known or predicted this. What matters now is that we handle the situation properly and make sure that Charlotte is protected. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the palace became increasingly tense. Staff members noticed the unusual security measures and the presence of investigators, though none of them understood the full scope of what was happening. Tom Parker Bowles continued his normal activities, unaware that his every movement was being monitored and documented. The evening brought a family meeting that would be remembered as one of the most difficult in the recent history of the royal family. As they gathered in the king's private dining room, each person carried the weight of knowing that their family was facing a crisis that could have far-reaching consequences for both the individuals involved and the monarchy itself. Princess Charlotte, despite her youth, showed remarkable composure as she faced the adults who were working to protect her and ensure justice was served. Her courage in speaking out had set in motion events that would ultimately determine whether predatory behavior would be tolerated within the royal circle, regardless of family connections or social position. The confrontation that would change everything began at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 days after Princess Charlotte's formal interview. Tom Parker Bowles had been summoned to what he believed was a routine meeting with palace security about upcoming events. Instead, he found himself facing Detective Chief Inspector Williams, Detective Sergeant Thompson, and Captain Morrison in a conference room that had been set up for formal questioning. Mr. Parker Bowles, DCI Williams began, her voice professional but firm, we need to discuss an incident that allegedly took place between you and Princess Charlotte 3 days ago in the palace library. Tom felt his stomach drop, but he maintained his composure. I'm not sure what you mean. I did see Charlotte briefly in the library, but it was just a casual conversation. Is there some kind of problem? We'd like you to tell us about that conversation in your own words, Detective Sergeant Thompson said, her pen poised over her notepad. Please take your time and try to remember as many details as possible. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his mind racing as he tried to figure out exactly what Charlotte might have told them. He decided his best strategy was to minimize the conversation and portray it as completely innocent. It was really nothing significant, he said, forcing a casual tone. I went to the library to look for a book about royal history for a project I'm working on. Charlotte was there studying. We chatted for maybe 10 or 15 minutes about school, her interests, normal things you'd discuss with a teenager. DCI Williams made notes as he spoke, occasionally nodding to encourage him to continue. Can you be more specific about what you discussed regarding her interests? Just general things. How she was doing in school, whether she enjoyed her studies, that sort of thing. I might have mentioned that royal life can be challenging for young people, that it's important to have outlets and privacy. Did you discuss social media with Princess Charlotte? Detective Sergeant Thompson asked. Tom hesitated for just a moment too long before answering. I may have mentioned that young people today use social media differently than adults understand. It's natural for teenagers to want some privacy in their communications. Did you offer to help her set up private social media accounts? I might have mentioned that there are ways to maintain privacy online, but it wasn't a formal offer or anything inappropriate. I was just making conversation. The investigators continued their questioning for over an hour, carefully probing every aspect of Tom's account and comparing it to Charlotte's detailed statement. With each inconsistency, each evasive answer, the case against him became stronger. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, a devastated queen consort Camilla was meeting with her private secretary to discuss the impossible situation she found herself in. The woman who had worked so hard to gain acceptance within the royal family now faced the potential destruction of everything she had built, all because of her son's alleged behavior. "Ma'am, we need to consider how this might affect your public engagements," her secretary said carefully. "If this becomes public knowledge, there will inevitably be questions about your response and whether you were aware of any concerning behavior." Camilla stared out the window, her mind reeling with the implications of what was happening. "I keep thinking I must have missed signs, that there must have been something that should have warned me. How could I not have known if my own son was capable of this?" "Ma'am, predatory behavior is often hidden from family members. These individuals can be very skilled at presenting different faces to different people." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. King Charles entered, his expression grave. "Camilla, we need to talk. The investigation has uncovered some additional information." Camilla felt her heart sink even further. "What kind of additional information?" "The investigators have been looking into Tom's background more thoroughly. They've discovered that there have been other complaints about inappropriate behavior, though none were ever formally reported or investigated." The queen consort sank into her chair, the full weight of the situation finally hitting her. "Other complaints? From other young people?" A former colleague of his mentioned that there were concerns about his interactions with young interns at a food magazine where he worked several years ago. And there was an incident at a charity event where a parent complained about him paying too much attention to their teenage daughter. Camilla buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the revelation that her son's behavior toward Charlotte was apparently part of a pattern rather than an isolated incident. The investigators want to interview these other individuals to see if they're willing to provide formal statements, Charles continued. "This investigation is becoming much larger than we initially